We'll be looking at the chat. So if you do have questions, please feel free to type those into the chat. Jennifer has added a link, I believe, in the chat with the link to the handbook. So if you'll take just a second to look at the chat, you'll want to, maybe if you can split your screen, have the handbook pulled up. It will be helpful for you to see a visual as we go through. All right, so a little background of the TNCR handbook. The reason we have the handbook in place is based in policy. So policy 5.504, where we're looking at all EPPs and go through and have this opportunity that to be anchored in a review. And so each state managed full approval review and comprehensive review shall include evidence demonstrating the alignment to and the high quality implementation of the CAPE standards. We are looking at alignment with INTASC and those 10 INTASC standards within the core teaching, and then looking at specific provider and program requirements that we see in policy 5.505. So everything we'll talk through today is anchored in policy and making sure that we have a process in place for EPPs to show that continuous improvement process. The TNCR handbook has come through many iterations, but it began in 2014 when the State Board of Education adopted policy 5.504. In that time, or following that time, the department created the implementation working group with, you can see, representatives from EPPs, LEAs, the department, and SCORE. During that time, they worked to provide advice to the department regarding the protocols, tools that we'll see within the handbook, and benchmarks for EPPs to meet. This group was important, the implementation working group, as really that communication piece so that all stakeholders were involved. That implementation working group transitioned to the educator prep working group, what we call EPWG, which is still in place now, and was a very critical part and group in giving us feedback through the refinement and editing of the new handbook. So in 2017, EPWG began working on the TNCR handbook. Our handbook does reflect CAPE standards, and so that initial handbook reflected the 2013 CAPE standards. In 22, the CAPE standards were updated, and so that's what's really led us here today to this process of updating our handbook and making sure it reflects the 2022 CAPE standards. This next section is in the handbook. It is really a nice process overview of the TNCR process. I'm not going to read through each step, but I think it's an important resource for you to see the continuous improvement process within TNCR. And so one of the, I think, benefits of this process is that it is iterative and allows for the EPP to have opportunities to present, share evidence, but also to refine what they've shared through the process until the final visit and the final report. It also really allows the review team, if you could mute, let's see if you can mute yourself. There we go. It allows the review team to have opportunities to look at initial evidence, to ask questions of the EPP, and that back and forth through the TNCR process is critical to really make sure that we get a comprehensive, for lack of a better word, take on where the EPP currently is in regards to the 5 standards. So within the handbook, if you have your copy pulled up, as you flip through, you'll notice that the handbook is organized in very repetitive fashion. So you should hopefully it'll be easy to get to become familiar with. The layout of the new handbook and the updated handbook is exactly the same as the previous handbook. We did not want to change the layout. For those of you that are comfortable with the organization, we wanted to maintain that that routine. But what you will find if you are new to the handbook, which I know many EPPs have new people in positions, and this may be the first time using this resource, What you'll find are really three sections within each of the standards. So you'll start with the introduction to the standard. With the handbook, you'll start with standard 5. We'll talk about why later, but you'll see the introduction to the standard. You'll have an overview of that standard, really what the big idea is of the standard, the why behind the standard, and looking at the summary of all the evidence that would be provided within that standard. You'll also have an overview of the required exhibits, which are those required and optional files that you would upload and share through TN Atlas. Following the standard introduction, it breaks down into standard components and then the indicator detail. So this is where you'll see nice definitions of terms that are used throughout the standard. You'll see specific considerations for Tennessee, so that this is kind of the differentiation between the CAPE piece, but the Tennessee specific considerations. And then you'll also see the annual reports data, the details around annual reports data that would be included within that standard as applicable. Not each of the standards, not all of the standards have annual report data included. And then finally, in the organization piece, we're looking at really the nitty-gritty of the standard. So where you would go to find what evidence is required. So the standard prompts and the rubric that's used to score that standard and the evidence provided. So those prompts will change between standards. You may have 3 or 4 prompts. Some prompts have more, some prompts have, or some standards have more and some standards have less. But this is where you'll see the questions, and we'll talk about those later as well. But those questions and those opportunities to provide evidence are outlined within this section. And then, like I said, the rubrics are below each of those indicators and really breaks down how to self-score. Really, you could self-score to see what the review team will be looking at, but also to kind of align with the standard prompts. So you'll see the rubric aligned back to the prompts and back to the required and optional evidence. Take a little pause right here. Any questions about the organization or background of TNCR? Okay, we will transition into this next part. This is really the meat of the presentation. We will send this presentation out and have it available, so you'll have a copy. But this is really where we'll show the alignment and transitions between the 2020 to 21 to the 23-24 handbook. So beginning with Standard 5, we start with Standard 5 in the handbook, not because we cannot count, but because Standard 5 is crucial. So it is the quality assurance system that the EPP has in place to show and to support continuous improvement. So it's critical that it supports the ability of the EPP to meet standards 1 through 4, which is why it comes first. An EPP's capacity for operational, strategic effectiveness, it's all dependent upon a well-designed system for quality assurance. So this section addresses the needs of the EPP and the specialty area program levels. The importance of Standard 5 is to show how this quality assurance system is maintained and how data and information are gathered by the system, and then how those data are used for programmatic changes and innovations for continuous improvement. So on this slide, you'll see, and this will be a repetitive slide for each of the standards, you'll see the previous standard outline. And so each of those components, 5.1 through 5.5 on the left, is how the previous handbook would have been broken down. Those have been condensed into 4 components, 5.1 through 5.3. And so a further breakdown of Standard 5 is found here. So again, we now have 4 components rather than 5, which is nice. Within the handbook, if you have that pulled up, you'll see the narrative prompts are outlined under each of those components within Standard 5. Each have required and optional file uploads that you would provide through TN Atlas Upload. There are no annual reports integration specifically in Standard 5, although Standard 5 is connected to other standards that do have annual report components. So basically, like I was talking about, I won't read the next part to you, but this evidence really is looking at that high-level overview of the quality assurance system, looking at clear connections to the other standards in standards 1 through 4, and looking at that continuous improvement, the continuous improvement efforts and the process around continuous improvement. With standard 1, so we'll go back to standard 1, we're looking at the EPP's ability to address the candidate's competencies within specialized content and pedagogical content knowledge, and the skills to apply their knowledge with all pre-K-12 students. So also looking at how the EPP has programmatic design and in place so that those candidates can demonstrate in-task standards. And so all 10 in-task standards are integrated into the components within Standard 1. This standard had quite substantial changes. You'll see on the left, 2021, that we had several components integrated into the previous handbook. Those have all now been organized into 4 components within the new handbook, so 1.1 through 1.4. 1.1 is integrated throughout several of those new components, so you'll see that throughout. And then the 3.6 came from Standard 3, but is found now integrated in with Standard or Component 1.4. So a nice breakdown, I think, kind of alignment into the new handbook. Within Standard 1, again, we've moved from 4 components or 5 components to 4 components. Again, you'll see if you're looking through the handbook, you'll see the narrative prompts broken down with required optional file uploads. And so the formatting is still the same. In Standard 1, we do have annual reports integration with Domain 3, which is candidate assessment. So that would be included within Standard 1 evidence that is provided through TN Atlas. So overall, with Standard 1, we're looking for a demonstration of alignment of program content and clinical practice to ensure the understanding of those in-task standards. The EPP would also demonstrate how programs are designed to support candidates' abilities to develop more complex instructional skills and strategies. So really looking at the comprehensive integration of in-task standards. I'll take a pause right here after 2 standards. Any questions about Standard 5 or Standard 1? Okay. All right, moving on to Standard 2. I enjoy Standard 2 so much on a personal note because we get to talk about partnerships, and partnerships are so critical to the success for our EPPs and to our candidates. And so Standard 2 really addresses the need for the EPP to ensure that effective partnerships and high quality clinical experiences are in place in our preparation so that candidates can develop knowledge, skills, and those dispositions that are necessary to demonstrate with their pre-K-12 students. So we're looking at not a lot of change in this standard from 2021 to 2023. Still 3 components and organized very similarly. We'll move to the next slide. There. So we're looking at very much aligned with the previous standard. Again, narrative prompts and required and optional file uploads that you would access and upload through TN Atlas. There are no annual reports integration within this standard. Obviously, your partnership agreements are critical. State recognized and primary partnership agreements would be critical to this standard. Overall, Standard 2, we're looking at a demonstration to really be able to collaborate and have that decision-making across clinical preparation with the partners. And so demonstrating that collaboration and providing that evidence. We're looking at addressing recruitment, selection, preparation, observation, development, and retention of both school-based and the provider-based clinical educators. And then finally, to demonstrate that clear and intentional design of clinical experiences with partner engagement. And so that collaboration piece, the mutually agreed upon processes that are in place are critical with standard 2, and the partnerships and clinical experiences. All right, moving on to more standards. Standard 3. Standard 3 looks at the need for the EPP to engage in strategic recruitment of candidates, looking at meeting diverse employment needs, and to support candidate success from admission through completion. This standard also looks at the importance of deliberate recruitment plans and goals in place to select high quality candidates. And so quite a bit of change within Standard 3. You'll see from the previous handbook, several of those components have been narrowed down to 3 total components. So just more aligned and I think strategic in this new handbook. So we moved from 6 components previously to 3 currently. Again, narrative prompts, required and optional file uploads that you would do through and provide through TN Atlas. There are annual reports integrated into this standard as well. So overall with Standard 3, we're looking at documented strategies focused on recruitment of candidates, providing that evidence. We want to see the demonstration of how the EPP monitors the candidate progression and demonstration of non-academic dispositional ability at both admission and throughout the preparation of the candidate. We look at clearly defined high standards and providing multiple forms of assessments to inform provider decisions, and then demonstrating how those candidates meet or exceed high standards and their impact on pre-K-12 student learning prior to making those licensure recommendations. And then finally, we'll wrap up our crosswalk with Standard 4. Standard 4 is program impact, and Standard 4 looks at addressing the results of preparation. So we're looking at when candidates are employed in positions for which they have been prepared. So through the EPP annual reports, data are presented to support and fulfill the expectations of this standard. The data may include, or does include, TBOS, that value-added data, observational data, and results from the 10 educator and district surveys. And we'll show you in just a moment one way to access your data that is on TN Atlas. So with Standard 4, that crosswalk, we moved from 4 components to 3 components. So again, narrowing down the number of components, including narrative prompts and required optional file uploads, again, through TN Atlas. And then within Standard 4, we have Domain 3 and 5 of the annual reports integrated as evidence and data sources. So overall, with Standard 4, we want the EPP should be able to demonstrate that completers have made an impact. So they have a positive and measurable impact on pre-K-12 student learning and development, and they exhibit the characteristics of effective teaching. We want to be able to know and see that the employers are satisfied with the job embedded candidates and program completers overall, and then also that the program completers are satisfied with their preparation related to their role as educators. Again, heavy data integrated into Standard 4, specifically with Domain 3 and 5 of the annual reports. Okay, I'm going to take a pause right here. This, as the end of their standards crosswalk, really looking at a high-level overview of how those standards and the components specifically have transitioned from the previous handbook to the current handbook. Are there any questions related to any of the standards as far as just from a high level? And if you have a question, please drop it in the chat if you don't want to ask. Happy to answer that in whichever way you feel comfortable. All right, so the next section, we've added into this presentation since TACTI for just a visual support. And so within TN Atlas, just being comfortable, I think, with that platform and knowing where to and how to access those requests for evidence when you go to start providing the narrative and the document files for this comprehensive process. So these, again, pictures are integrated into the PowerPoint, so you will get this within the PDF. But just in case you did not know, you can access through, as you go into the reviews. Once you log into TN Atlas under My EPP Reviews, that will bring you to a new page, and this page has different titles on the blue boxes, but all the blue boxes are RFEs, and so each of those blue boxes represents some type of data collection opportunity for the EPP. And so once you go to this section, you'll go to the left. It's hard to read, but that light blue box where the red arrow is pointing says comprehensive review. So you would go to comprehensive review and scroll until you see the TNCR comprehensive review for your EPP. And it would be labeled as a name. Sorry, let me go back. It would be labeled, like, for instance, where it says test for training, it would just say TNCR review, Aquinas College, whatever your EPP is, it would be listed there. So once you select the TNCR RFE, it will bring you to a new page. We went ahead and created the drop down so you could see everything kind of in one screenshot. What you'll see when you first get there are the standards, the blue box standard where it says standard 1, those will all be condensed. So you'll see standard 1 through standard 5. And you'll just select each one of those drop downs to be able to see the component within each of the standards. And then within the component, you'll drop that down and you'll see the indicators. This is where you would provide the evidence that we just outlined. So within the handbook, when you're looking at narrative prompts, those narrative prompts are actually in alignment with this example. A, B, C, D, E would be the narrative prompts for 1.1. So you would select on that and you'll see actual language from the handbook that's copied in. So they align, and that's where you would input your narrative or the data that you want to upload. It's kind of a visual walk. I think if you're new to this, again, it helps to kind of have a visual with this process. The next piece, if you go back to the starting point for the EPP, when you log into TN Atlas, you would go to My EPP Reviews. Instead of going to the left to Comprehensive Reviews, you're going to go all the way to the right, excuse me, and you will see this light blue box at the end of your tabs that say Other. And so when you scroll here, you will see the annual or the data that's been uploaded by your EPP that's been validated and verified by your EPP. And so as part of annual reports processing and the State Board of Education report card process, each year we send you your data to verify in TN Compass. Usually that's around May or June timeframe. But once the EPP verifies that the data are accurate, then your EPP has actually uploaded that data back into TN Atlas. So it is there for you when you need it. But once that's accessed through TN Atlas, you can download that data. So again, you would select the box that has the data that you're looking for. Again, drop down until you find where the EPP had uploaded that data, and you can download it there. One important thing to know is as the department, it requires a 10 completers or more for the department to analyze the data. The data is there, it's just that it's not analyzed if it's less than 10. So you still have access to that, but it may just not be analyzed if it's less than 10. Again, it looks like this when you choose the drop down, and then you can download from that link. Now, I will say this, I think another important piece of this process is as we go through the comprehensive review process with each EPP, we are collaboratively meeting and supporting with you. And so it's a team effort that starts really a year and a half out from the actual review. So when your EPP is scheduled for that review, we will be in contact with you, and we really walk this process with you as state facilitators. We don't complete the review, but we facilitate the review. And so we're thankful to have excellent, outstanding, and committed reviewers in the state of Tennessee who are trained and passionate about making sure to provide support, collegial support, I would even say, to partners in other EPPs. And so while this process starts a year and a half out, we meet with each EPP team. We make sure that you have personalized training to go through this process so that we can answer specific questions for your EPP. And then we walk this step and walk this path with you throughout. And so I say that because I think being newer to this role, I started, I think, with the team in February. And so it's been exciting for me to see really the process with so many of our EPPs really discovering and refining their own ways and their own systems, but doing that as a team effort has been really exciting. And so we're in this together, and to make sure that we answer any questions that you have, but also that we give you specific EPP support as you specifically go through the process. Before we take any questions or have just a moment before we end today, I did want to provide just a list of resources for you and just some reminders for you before we leave. So the new handbook, we've already shared that website, but it is available on the Educator Prep website. You've got the link, and hopefully you can download that and have that accessible. We will be having new reviewer training. So if you are interested in being a state reviewer and serving on TNCR reviews, we will be having reviewer training in the spring. More than likely, it will be in February, this coming February. And it is an excellent way to really have a deep dive into the process, to have a deep dive into the standards, and really a comprehensive understanding of a complex process. And so it's also a great way to meet other colleagues from other EPPs across the state and strengthen your own knowledge. So we'll be putting out information through the EdPrep email. So if you're not signed up for that, you can reach out to one of us on the EdPrep team, and we'll send you the link, but make sure that you're getting that email, and we'll announce that through the EdPrep email listserv. So we'll be having that training this spring. Also, our first review actually using the new handbook standards will be coming up in spring of 25. So we've started that. We've already done the orientation with 2 of our EPPs that will be using the handbook, and they are well on their way to collecting and narrating their evidence, and we're excited for them to be the first to lead in this transition. Also, thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer dropped the link for if you want to sign up for the EPP update in the chat, so if you're not already signed up. Another great resource are the CAPE revised standards, specifically the CAPE workbook with the revised standards. And so the great thing about, I think, this CAPE alignment with the State Department is that the resources within the CAPE workbook really can benefit, I think, our EPPs that are going through the TNCR process. So again, another resource for you. It is not the workbook that anchors TNCR. TNCR is its standalone self, but definitely the CAPE language has influenced our work, and it can be a resource to you as you go through the TNCR review. And then finally, we have just completed a handbook crosswalk document. It's very similar to what you've seen today as far as previous components within the standards to the current components within the standards. It's basically a crosswalk to show what has been to what is now. That document is not live yet on the website, but it should be within the coming days live on our website. So it would be on that same page where you would find the handbook. It will be located just beneath that section. All right, we're going to stop for just a second. If anyone has any questions that you may want to ask while we're all here together.
This is Lisa from Tennessee Tech. I have a question.
Sure.
Is this for, we are CAPE accredited and go through a CAPE state review. So this doesn't apply to us, correct?
Correct. This would be the TNCR, the EPPs that choose to go through the Tennessee Comprehensive Review. The part that would impact you, Lisa, would be the SAP review process. That's what the state side would do. So you would have a state review team that would work alongside the CAPE review team, and the state review team would look at your specialty area programs.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Well, there are 3 emails on the screen right now. If you need anything, please reach out to educator preparation email with your big questions. Jennifer and I, our emails are both on there as well. And wanted to thank my colleagues Bianca Jefferson and Lori Farley and Deanna Meyer for being on the call today as well. Thank you guys for supporting our work. And if anyone has questions following today that you just didn't want to ask or come up later, please don't hesitate to reach out with anything at any time, and we'll be here to support this process and your EPP. All right. Everybody have a great Friday. We appreciate you being here today. Thank you.